What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero back with another retro Yu-Gi-Oh video, and here we're diving back into Yata Format, exploring a very interesting deck that actually one of the users on my Discord actually came up with, and that user was Colgate, who was the main force behind the Machine Reasoning Gate deck. But in this case, I didn't just copy the list one for one. I had some major complaints with it, so I actually mixed it up a bit, retooled some aspects that I didn't particularly like, and just fit it more to my taste as a whole. So this is Light Metamorphosis. And the idea of this deck is really, really sick. So basically the idea is it's another Metamorphosis deck, like some of the other decks I've shown off on the channel recently. But the idea is that like you have other ways to get to a level 6 or a level 5. So Soul of Purity and Light is a level 6 monster that you can special summon by banishing 2 light monsters from your graveyard. And if you get this out on the field as a special summon, it can be an extender, can go for extra damage, and it can also potentially go into a Ryu Sentry if you have a Metamorphosis in hand. In addition, you have a lot more ways to access level 5 fusion monsters with things like Thunder Dragon, as this is just a great card to pitch to the graveyard to fuel your Soul of Purity and Light, as well as just being able to treat over one of your monsters to go into something like a Dark Bolter the Terrible, which is an insanely powerful fusion monster, especially in this format, and can just win a game on its own. So I really like the idea of this deck. Of course, the main flaw with this deck is that the other light monsters in this format aren't really that good. So we are playing things like Triple Shining Angel just to fuel our graveyard with lights, but this doesn't really have the best targets to go into. I mean, I put a Banish for the Light in here as a potential target because if your opponent isn't just crashing with a tomato, then oftentimes if they can destroy Shining Angel, you can bring out Banish for the Light, switch to defense, and that will be decent enough. It can stop things like Sangan or your opponent's Mystic Tomatoes. So I think that this is an okay strat here, but it is kind of underwhelming, and that is this deck's major flaw. But once you have your graveyard fueled up with enough lights, and you're able to actually get your Metamorphosis plays going, this deck can be very, very formidable. So let's just go through a quick card by card. So first off, we've got the Shining Angel package here going into Banish for the Light. You can also potentially bring out a Magician of Faith in weird edge cases, but this is mainly in here as a level 1 flip monster that also fuels your graveyard with lights, and is very, very good. So you're not generally bringing this out off of Shining Angel, but it's still a very good monster to have in your deck. We also have a Fiber Jar and Injection Fairy Lily, and to search out both of these, as well as all the other, weak monsters in our deck, we've got Sangan and Witch. We've got a Sinister Serpent. We got 2 Soul of Purity and Light. You could potentially up this to 3, but you're already not running the most light monsters, so that might be a bit of a risk. We've got a Spirit Reaper here as just a monster that's hard to get through, and also another level 3 in certain edge cases. You want to go into something like Dragoness. We've got Triple Thunder Dragon, and that's it for the monsters. For these spells, we've got Change of Heart, Confiscation, Darkhold, Delinquent Duo, Graceful Charity, Heartbeat, Feather Duster, Triple Metamorphosis, a Mirage of Nightmare, Monster Reborn, Triple MST, Painful Choice, Pot of Greed, Raigeki, Snatch Steal, and Forceful Sentry. So basically all the powerful spells that are staples in this format, plus Triple Metamorphosis. For the Trouts, we've got Call of the Haunted, Imperial Order, Mirror Force, a Raigeki Break, which is actually really, really good in this deck because you've got access to Sinister Serpent, and also to Triple Thunder Dragon, which can be very, very nice. Fuels up the graveyard with a bit more lights and also acts as a bit of a pop. Now, you generally want to keep at least 1 Thunder Dragon in hand to potentially go into Dark Bolter if you manage to pull that off. That's why we're only playing one of this, but I could definitely see people experimenting with the ratios on this. And lastly, we've got a Ring of Destruction. For the side deck, we've got an Air Knight Parshath, a Jinzo, a Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer, and a Yata Grasso. These are just sort of generally good toolbox cards that you can bring in certain situations. For Spell and Trap removal, we've just got the Heavy Storm. You could potentially switch out something else in this side deck for like a Dust Tornado, but I think with Heartbeat, Feather Duster, Triple MST, and Heavy Storm, that should be pretty decent against most back row heavy decks. We've got Double Knock and a Ceasefire in case you're up against more flip focus strategy. We got Triple Scapegoat against certain more aggressive decks. We've got another Raigeki Break in case we need more spot removal, and we've got Triple TT against aggressive decks again. For the Fusion deck, this actually does matter. We've got double Dark Bolter the Terrible, a Darkfire Dragon, Dragoness the Wicked Knight, Fiend Skull Dragon, Reaper on the Nightmare, Ryu Sentry times 3. Maybe you could cut this down for an additional copy of something else, but I don't think it's terrible to have 3 of this. We've got Super Robo Lady and Super Robo Yara, which you might want to go into in certain niche scenarios. We've got a Last Warrior from Another Planet in case we potentially take control of an opponent's level 7 monster, which, can potentially happen as a weird edge case, so it's good to include here. And lastly, we've got Triple Thousand Eyes Restrict, as, one of the most common meta plays you'll probably be making is, setting a Serpent, metamorphosing it away, and bringing out a Thousand Eyes Restrict. And that's going to do it for the deck breakdown. There are some definite changes you can make with this deck. The original deck was playing Air Knight Parshath in the main. I took this out because I figured the deck was already kind of bricky and there wasn't necessarily the space for this, but you could definitely put this back in the main deck if you wanted to, as it is a very powerful card in this format if you actually manage to stick and actually get its effect off more than once. And there are some other additional changes that you could make, like the original deck was playing Thunder Nyan, which I was not the biggest fan of, as so many of your meta targets are going to cause Thunder Nyan to basically be useless, but it is a potential beater that you can play in this deck that does fuel your Souls of Purity and Light. So there are other ways to go with this. You could also include things like White Magical Hat if you want another light target to bring out off a Shining Angel. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this build. I do have some complaints about it that I realized after playing some games with it, but I'll get into those after we dive into the games. So without further ado, let's jump into the games and show you what this deck can do. Okay, we've got the first of these games up against Soul65, a frequent guest on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on. We are going to lose the rock, paper, scissors, which is quite unfortunate, as this deck would like to go first, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. Oh, well, with this hand, we really wanted to go first. Wow, that is a killer hand right there. But our opponent's just going to set or do nothing and pass back to us. So we just get to, do this hand either way. Now I go for the duo first here instead of the forceful because I figured if they had a Sinister Serpent, they would have just committed it to field this past turn. So I figured the fact that they didn't do anything means that they don't. And so I will just go for duo before Sentry here, as I do think that's the correct play to make if they don't have Serpent. And we hit a Reasoning, which might explain why they didn't do anything on their first turn, as you generally want to use Reasoning to get a bit more aggressive. So they pitch a Reasoning, they also pitch a Barrel Dragon, so it looks like they're on the sort of machine OTK version of the Reasoning deck that we played before on the channel, so cool to see. We're then going to fire a Forceful Sentry, and yeah, it looks like they bricked on a lot of Tribute monsters here. I think what we want to get rid of is the Monster Reborn, as reborning back a Barrel Dragon could be really good for them. So that is the most threatening thing in hand. And, we can sort of play around Jinzo, MST, and limit removal. So, yeah, I'm not too concerned about that. We're going to bring in a Sangan and just hit in for 1,000. Just start getting in the damage there. Then we're just going to set a Harpies. They likely won't commit the limit removal and the MST to board. So I figure this is a good way just to bait out the MST now on a card that isn't really going to be as useful. So we set that, pass back to them. They're just going to set 2, pass back to us, and that's perfectly fine. I guess because they knew that we knew about the MST, they figured that our back row wasn't really anything worth using it on, and luckily we get rewarded for that. So we clear the MST and a Metamorphosis, which is very nice to see. We can just get in here for 1,000 plus 1,400, and I'm feeling really good about this. Now, you might be wondering why I'm not using the Painful Choice at all, and the reason for this is I feel like Painful Choice could be better just to use to develop things later, because we don't really need anything too urgently right now, so we can just save this for when we actually do. We're going to set the Painful Choice as a bluff, though, just so that way we don't lose to Delinquent Duo. I mean, we wouldn't lose, but it would still be really unfortunate. And they're just going to pass back to us again. Now, this turn, I actually do miss lethal, and it's quite unfortunate, as I actually did have a really sick line here. So what we could have done here is we could have activated Metamorphosis, tributing off Sangan to bring out, well, I guess we can't see it here, but we could bring out Dragonus, the Wicked Knight, and that's 1,300 attack plus 1,400, which is 27. Sangan searches out Injection Fairy Lily, and then we get in for game. So we could have done that. I didn't notice it fast enough. I realized it the next turn, and I was like, darn, I could have actually just won this past turn. And so we do kind of open them up to potentially being able to recover here, but I do still feel really good about our chances here. Either way, they're just going to bring out a Mechanical Chaser, and they're going to think about this and actually not attack in. They don't want us getting that search off Sangan or Shining Angel, and that's perfectly fine by us. We're just going to Raigeki that Mechanical Chaser away, attack in, and yeah, they just have a set limit removal. So, yep, they bricked on tributes here as well. So even though we didn't go for that lethal line the turn before, we still were able to pretty comfortably win this one. Although, this might not have been the best showcase of the deck's power because our opponent did brick hard, which does really, happen a lot if you're playing a machine sort of OTK deck like that with the Reasoning package. But, that's a risk you take when playing that sort of combo deck. Let's see if they can actually do better this game, especially if they're going first. Oh, double Thunder Dragon the opener. Always feels bad there. Our opponent's going to think about this a bit. Summon out Sangan, set 2, pass back to us. We draw Mirage of Nightmare. This is a really good hand here. We're going to pitch that Thunder Dragon for a Thunder Dragon. We're just going to go for Graceful now. They've got IO, which is a bit unfortunate. We're going to activate Mirage, set 2, pass back to them. Now, if they want to let the IO lapse, we get some draws off Mirage, so that's really nice. This is basically forcing them into keeping the IO up. And they will indeed keep it up. They are going to just attack in for 1,000. That's fine by us. And they're going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw a Sangan of our own, which is pretty nice. We're going to bring that out and just hit into the set, see what it is. It is a Spirit Reaper. That's a bit worrying. We could potentially Change of Heart targeting the Spirit Reaper and just pop it, because while the effective Change of Heart won't go through because of Imperial Order, the cost, which is targeting a monster, it will indeed go through. So Spirit Reaper will still be targeted. Although the after resolving a card effect thing makes this a bit weird. I think it will still be destroyed, but I don't quite know, because Change of Heart's effect, yeah, I don't know. Let me know about that in the comments down below. I think it does work where Change of Heart will be able to pop Reaper even under IO, but I'm not quite sure because of the whole resolving thing. But we'll just pass back to our opponent. If Change of Heart did actually let us pop the Spirit Reaper, there actually could have been a good reason to do that, as something our opponent can do is just crash their Sangan into our Sangan. We get a search. If they attack in Spirit Reaper as well and they hit the card we search out of our hand, that could be pretty unfortunate for us. So there actually was a potential reason to do that. But we're not going to do it yet. They're just going to go for a Jinzo here, and that's fine by us if this turns on our spells, which is pretty nice. They're going to grab a Cannon Soldier, switch to this Reaper to attack, and they will be able to potentially snipe the card that we search out here. We're going to grab a Sinister Serpent just to make sure that just in case they do hit that new card, it won't actually be anything important here. They are going to snipe a card out of our hand. It will be the Thunder Dragon, which is kind of unfortunate. We would have preferred the Serpent, but I mean, that's a little bit greedy, so yeah, I think this is ultimately fine. We're going to go for a Sinister Serpent, then fire a Metamorphosis here. We could have potentially also just gone for Change of Heart, target Jinzo, and then tribute over it for a Thunder Dragon later. That was another potential line we could do. But I feel like this is probably the better line. But yeah, I don't know. Change of Heart's a more powerful card, which is why it would have potentially been a bit better. But anyways, we're going to attack in to that Spirit Reaper. They've got Ring of Destruction, though, so that will pop the 1,000 out restrict. We'll both lose 2,400. We'll set a Ring, pass back to our opponent. So Ring will be able to deal with the Reaper if they choose to attack in, although they might not even choose to attack in, given that we don't really have any cards in hand. We're going to grab back that Serpent. We could just get aggressive here, ringing their Spirit Reaper, and then just getting in with the Serpent. But I feel like we're still in a pretty good spot. I can't really think of anything that would cause us to lose in this scenario. Unfortunately, Tribute summoning out Visor Shock will actually do it. So that is unfortunate. We need to think on the summon. So we say think, you know, with that emoji. And then we see that they chain the call. So in general, something that you should do here is always wait. If your opponent is thinking, just wait it out. Like, it doesn't really pay to just immediately chain the call, as I mean, there are a number of things I could have been thinking on. And the ring, if I had ringed the Biter Shock here as a chain to, or not as a chain, oh yeah, it would be a chain to its effect, then they could have called the Haunted back the Jinzo and actually negated the ring. It doesn't actually end up mattering in this situation, but it is something good to note for the future. But anyways, now that they do that, we can chain the ring to the call and actually get that effect off. It won't actually matter here, as we'll still take the 800, and that will put us down to below the point where we actually died to Jinzo. But it's still good to think about. So kind of interesting there, Biter Shock. I'm not really a big fan of the card, but it did come in clutch in that game there. If we had gotten a bit less greedy and actually just, you know, ringed the Reaper, that would have cut off that line of play. But I honestly was not respecting Biter Shock in that game state, and maybe I should have. So we go into game 3, and honestly, I don't really change up my side deck that much. I think I add in some Scapegoats here as a chainable spell against something like Biter Shock or Jinzo. That can be pretty good. So I bring in those Scapegoats, and hopefully that will protect me a little bit. I think I only bring in one, and I side out Duo because, you know, our opponent probably would be happy to discard powerful machines into the grave to revive with stuff. So I swap out a Duo for a Scapegoat, and we draw the Scapegoat, so pretty good. Although, you know, if we'd opened Duo here, that would have been probably a little bit better. We're going to go for the Forceful Sentry here, see what they've got. They've actually got an interesting selection of cards here. Now, there are a couple different things we could potentially Sentry back. We could just Sentry back the Parshath, but the issue is if we do that, then they can just bring a Gillisaurus and just get attacking in for damage. We could also potentially Sentry back the Gillisaurus just to cut them off of their tribute monster. And we could also just send back Reasoning, because Reasoning could get them out a monster as well. I think what I'm going to do here, though, is send back Gillisaurus. There is a bit of a disastrous turn of events where, I discard Thunder Dragon because I'm going to do that no matter what this turn anyways. They special summon Gillisaurus. We bring out Thunder Dragon. They snatch steal our Thunder Dragon, tribute over it for a Parshath. We do have Ring and Mirror Force to deal with that, but if they've got something like Harpies, then that would be pretty bad. Especially if, we'd set MST in preparation for the Snatch Steal and they Harpies the board. That would be kind of rough for us. So we are just going to take the Gillisaurus to avoid that nightmare scenario. I mean, there are still some bad scenarios with what we leave them here, but I think ultimately this is okay. And, maybe I should have just sent back the Parshath here either way, as, a 1400 attack monster isn't the most threatening. But I feel like this is ultimately fine, and just cuts them off of any other tribute monster they might potentially draw. With Reasoning, we can at least prevent them from getting out Jinzo by calling 6, so that would be fine as well. They're going to go for the Reasoning. They get out a Mechanical Chaser here, which is a little bit unfortunate for us. Now they have Tribute Fodder for the Parshath, but they're not going to commit it to board. I think that's probably wise. They're going to attack in for 1800 or 1850. And we're just going to go for this Scapegoat now. We know about the Parshath in hand, so we don't really want to use the Scapegoat as the last resort against that. So we might as well get these tokens out now. They are just going to pass back to us, and we're just going to set this Ring, pass back to them. If they do have Harpies, we can chain Ring to pop the Mechanical Chaser. We do lose the Mirror Force, which is quite unfortunate, but I think it's ultimately fine. Now, as another line of play we could have done, we could have potentially just pitched a Thunder Dragon, failed to find, and then brought out Soul Purity and Light to hit over our Mechanical Chaser there. That would have also been a fine option, but I feel like it's not really that necessary in this situation. We're in a pretty stable game state. We don't necessarily want to waste a Thunder Dragon on that. So I feel fine just holding that for a bit. Our opponent's going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw meta, so we're just going to go for that. They've got Imperial Orbit. We get the MST for the IO here. We can bring out 8,000 Hydro Restrict, take over their Mechanical Chaser, and just get in for 1850. They do have Scapegoat, so they will be able to bring out those 4 monsters on field there. That's ultimately fine by us. We'll still be able to hit into 1 this turn, and then just pass back to them. Now, something we could have actually done this turn is we could have set over the 1,000 Restrict, just to prevent them from Snatch stealing it, bringing out Parshath. But we do have 2 ways to deal with Parshath set, so I feel ultimately like that's fine, and that I didn't actually need to commit that to board just yet. They are indeed going to Snatch steal the Restrict and bring out the Parshath, and that's okay by me. They're going to attack in for 1900. We're just going to Mirror Force. This is a 1-for-1 trade. We could have potentially done it on the Ring instead, but at least we can chain Ring to spell and trap removal to pop one of their tokens. Won't deal damage, but it's still nice. So I value just being able to get the effect off before the spell and trap removal comes down, as opposed to getting in the damage there. We draw meta, which is not really that useful right now, since 1,000 Restrict on this board would be not the best. So we're just going to pass back to our opponent and see what they do. They're going to bring out a Pot of Greed, drawing 2 here, and they're going to just pass back to us. We feel fine about that. We could just Painful here, and we will indeed Painful. This allows us to turn on our Soul of Purity and Light, as long as we send at least 1, or no, we have to send at least 2 Light monsters here, but we'll send 3, just to keep the graveyard a bit buffed up. And so we're going to send a Confiscation, a Shining Angel, a Banish for the Light, a Magician Faith, and a Sangan here. I'm honestly fine with anything that they might give us here. We just want aggressive pressure, and we figure they don't want to give us the Confiscation. So, yeah, maybe this is wasting the Magician of Faith a little bit, but I feel like this is ultimately a fine set to send off Painful. We're going to bring out that Shining Angel, and we're just going to hit into 1 token here. We could have brought out Soul, Purity, and Light, but that plays a bit too much into board clears for my taste. They're going to meta here, bringing out a 1,000 Restrict, and we're just going to, on summon, they, prio the effect, but we're just going to ring it, so that will indeed destroy the Restrict before the Shining Angel gets sucked up. Unfortunately, they do have another Metamorphosis here, so they will be able to bring out a 1,000 Restrict, suck up that Shining Angel, and then hit into our token there. Ultimately, this is fine. I feel like that's not the most threatening monster in the world. Also, we can potentially just bring out Soul Purity and Light as a wall here, to wall up a little bit. But we're going to go for a Graceful Charity here, draw 3, and actually this just does it. This is actually incredibly good for us. we are going to do a play that may seem like it's going a bit all in, but I do think it's worth doing in this situation as there are very few actual outs to it. We're going to change of heart the restrict, tribute summon out a Thunder Dragon, then meta the Thunder Dragon away to bring out a Dark Bolter. We're going to reborn the Parshath here to get another body on field that lets us draw, and then we're going to banish 2 to bring out a Soul Purity and Light. As maybe this seems like it might be overcommitting, right? Because I used up everything in my hand to bring out 3 monsters on board, and this is a format with a lot of board clears. However, Dark Bolter the Terrible just basically solos those on its own. The only thing we really have to worry about here is something like a Mirror Force, which is unfortunate, but we can play around next turn because we don't have to actually attack with all of our monsters here. So they're just going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw Pot of Greed as well, so this is just getting even better. We're going to draw a Raigeki Break and a Mirage of Nightmare here. And we're just going to play around that Mirror Force, switch the Bolter to defense, attack in here. This is a bit worrying. If they've got like a Call of the Haunted or something, they could potentially bring back a Mechanical Chaser to block a little bit. But we've got Call of the Haunted of our own to bring out a monster from our graveyard as well. So it is ultimately fine. They reveal that they just had 2 normal spells, and that will indeed be the end of the game. Yep, and a Barrel Dragon limit removal in hand. That won't quite do it. So that will indeed be the end of the game, and it just shows how powerful Dark Bolter was. If Dark Bolter hadn't been brought out, then they could have just Darkhold our board away and potentially stabilized here, but with Dark Bolter, we can feel free to just get as aggressive as possible, and with access to Thunder Dragon, we have a lot more ways to access Dark Bolter than we would otherwise. So I think these games are really sick here and really do show the power of the light meta build. But this wasn't the only match that I played with the deck. I also played some other games with it. So let's dive into those now and see how this does. Okay, we've got a game against Danny Droid here. Another frequent guest to the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on. So we are going to actually win the die roll. So we do get to go first here. And this is a pretty killer hand, if I do say so myself. We're going to go for just a Delinquent Duo first. Just, pitching cards out of their hand. Hitting a Reborn is very nice. They're also going to discard a Parshath there. We're going to discard this Thunder Dragon, grab 2 Thunder Dragons to hand. Now we have a couple different options here. We're going to just choose to set the Shining Angel, set a Raigeki Break, pass back to our opponent. We could have also set the Banisher to wall up that way a little bit. But I feel like it's fine just setting the Angel, potentially getting more lights in our graveyard into rotation. That way, if we draw Soul Purity, we can bring it out right away. They're going to bring out a Mystic Tomato here, and that's fine by us. We will lose our Shining Angel, so we'll be able to bring out another one here. Shining Angel has a really disadvantageous crashing with Tomato here, which is a little bit unfortunate. What we could have potentially done is just summoned out Banisher and then attacked in with Shining Angel there. But instead, we're just going to bring out this Thunder Dragon and hit into their Tomato there. Just getting another monster out of the deck. If it's Sangan or Witch, we can potentially summon out Banisher next turn and get rid of it that way. So I feel pretty confident about this. They're going to bring out another Tomato and pass back to us. Now, we are running the risk of running into like a Jinzo, which would be pretty bad for us. We don't really have any good outs to that here. So maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe I should have just preemptively Raigeki braked the Tomato using the Serpent. But I feel like this is ultimately still fine. And we've got some outs to Jinzo in our deck. We are going to think about this a bit. And this is a bit tricky, but we are just going to Raigeki break, targeting the Tomato now. That way it won't trigger its effect. And then we're actually going to bring out a Banisher of the Light. So I'm going to attack into their set, which I have the read as like a Sangan or a Serpent or something, and it is indeed a Sangan. This Banisher did get some value here. We had to do it a little bit awkwardly because we wanted to Raigeki break before Banisher hit the field, so that way we retained our Serpent. And then we're going to set this call, activate a Mirage, pass back to our opponent. Now, we're playing a very risky game here, as if we don't draw like an MST or something to clear the Mirage, we could banish a lot of our powerful cards, which is very unfortunate. But I feel like it's worth doing just to get the draws in here. And also potentially, if they clear the Banisher next turn, we won't be at as much of a risk. So I think it's ultimately okay. Unfortunately, we don't draw an MST, but fortunately, they Harpy Feather Duster our back row here. So those will get banished. Harpies would also get banished, but we realize that now. And look, we would have drawn an MST anyways, so it's all good. We're going to think about exactly what to do, and they are going to realize that they have to banish the Harpies, and they will indeed do that. And we're going to bring out a Spirit Reaper here. They've got the TT for that, which is a bit unfortunate. But we're going to MST their back row. Reborn here, targeting Parshath. We could have potentially gone for the Reaper instead, but I think drawing cards here is a bit better. than just getting in for Reaper. And lastly, we could have potentially Metamorphosed the Parshath, bringing out a Dark Bolter to potentially play around some powerful spells that could cause us trouble. But we've got Raigeki to deal with whatever they bring out anyways, and we can save the Metamorphosis for like the Serpent Engrave or the Thunder Dragon there. Now, you might wonder why we didn't actually add back Serpent this turn. And the reason we did that was because we didn't want to potentially let them hand rip a Serpent while Banisher was on field and banish it. And at the standby phase of this turn, we didn't quite know they were going to clear our board. So I think it was ultimately fine. We are going to grab back this Serpent here, and then we're just going to banish 2, go for a Soul Purity and Light, try and get a bit aggressive here. If they've got TT, they might fire the TT now, and that'd be a bit unfortunate. Looks like they've got a ring instead. But yeah, if they hadn't gone for a ring now, what we would have done is we would have metamorphosed the Soul Purity and Light, gone for a Ryu Sentry, and that would have negated both TT and ring. So they had to basically use a trap now if they had it, and they will indeed go for that. We're going to summon out a Serpent, get in for 2,300 here, and that's pretty good. We're going to pass back to them, and they're just going to set 1, summon out an Exiled Force, so they will be able to hit over our Serpent. This will actually be 400 instead of 700 due to Soul Purity and Light's debuff effect, which is pretty nice. And then they're going to tribute off that Exiled for the Soul. So quite unfortunate, but we do get back that Serpent. We can just get aggressive here with the Serpent, hitting in for another 300. Isn't much of a clock, but it's something, and at least Serpent's on field to potentially tribute out for Thunder Dragon next turn. We're going to set a meta as a bluff because realistically we're not going to be using both metas at this point on, and they're going to go for a Graceful Charity here, pitching 2, and then they're going to go for a Scapegoat, which would be a lot better for them if we didn't have this Raigeki here. So this is fine because we've got Raigeki, so ultimately, I think we still win here. What we're going to do is we're just going to MST the back row, just in case. It's a meta, so this is perfectly fine. We're going to Raigeki their board away and then tribute over our Serpent for a Thunder Dragon. And that will be the end of Game 1. So, very commanding win at the end of Game 1. But, you know, it's kind of interesting that we faced 2 different players on Metamorphosis decks recently. But, I mean, I guess some of my recent videos have focused on meta, so it makes sense that more people are trying it out. But anyways, in Game 2, our opponent's going to T-set and pass. We like that play so much, we're going to do the same thing ourselves. We're going to bring out Tomato. We're going to go for TT here. We figure that they likely also had like a Sangan here, but this way we get the initiative, so we can search out some with Sangan, then just go in for an attack next turn. And I feel like having the initiative here is pretty nice. We're going to grab a Witch of the Black Forest just to sort of, you know, cycle and potentially get a better search next turn. We draw Thunder Dragon, which is pretty good. That was what we were potentially going to search with the Witch, but now we don't have to. So we get both the Thunder Dragons to hand. We're going to bring out Witch, attack in for 11 here, and that will indeed go through. We're going to set a Mirror Force, pass back to our opponent. They're going to bring out Gemini Elf, and that's fine by us. They're going to hit in to the Witch here. We could potentially Mirror Force this, but I think it's fine to take the 800, get a search here, search out that Spirit Reaper, and they'll pass back to us. We draw Magician of Faith, which at this point in the game is not really that good because we don't have we don't have any spells engraved. We also don't have 2 lights engraved. So yeah, we're just gonna set a Shining Angel, pass back to our opponent, and they're gonna Harpies our Mirror Force, which is really bad for us, especially when they bring out an Air Knight Power Shot to follow it up with. So that's really rough. We lose our Shining Angel. They get a draw. We luckily get out another Shining Angel, so that's pretty nice. And also we have Soul Purity and Light here for later. They're going to meta out a Dark Bolter, insanely strong card, and they're just going to pass back to us. So Dark Bolter only says normal monster or normal spells, so this is perfectly fine. We're going to Snatch Steal the Dark Bolter. They can't actually negate it with Dark Bolter, but they can negate it with that set Imperial Order that they've got. So kind of unfortunate there. So what we're going to have to do is we're just going to get in and crash to that Bolter. So we're going to attack our Soul Purity and Light in, crash with that Bolter, hit in for 300, and rip a card out of their hand. We rip a Snatch Steal, which is very nice, and we also get in for 1,400 more. We're just going to pass back to them. That IO will drop. They've got Dark Hole to clear up the board, and they'll be able to hit in for 11. Ultimately, I think this was still fine for us. We get Pot of Greed now, so that's really good. We're going to Pot of Greed, draw 2 here. We draw a Mystical Space Typhoon and Sinister Serpent, both of which are pretty decent. We're going to set this ring where we obviously don't want to use it on the Witch, but, you know, there are many other things that we might want to use it on instead, so they're going to bring out a Gemini Elf here, hit in to our Magician of Faith. We are just going to let that go through. We'll save the ring for something more important. They're going to hit in for 1,100 here, and then they're just going to pass back to us. We draw Raigeki Break, which is pretty good. We're going to go for Pot of Greed here, drawing 2. We'll set this Serpent, fire a Metamorphosis here, and that will bring out a Thousand Eyes Restrict. We'll be able to suck up that Gemini Elf there and get in for some damage. So we'll be able to hit in for 800, and they will get a search here, so they will likely be able to search out something that deals with this, and they will indeed search out the Exiled, which will deal with that. So we're just going to set a Raigeki Break and an MST. They've already used up their Harpy's Feather Duster, so we don't really have to be worried about that. They might have brought in like a Heavy Storm, but a lot of these Metamorphosis decks don't really play too heavy back row, so I feel like this is ultimately fine. Our opponent is going to just set one, pass back to us. We draw Raigeki, which is really nice. We're going to grab back this Sinister Serpent here. We're going to Raigeki Break the set, given that we know that Sangan and Witch are gone. And given that they searched out Exile and they didn't use it, that probably is something pretty good that they have set. So I feel like it's fine doing this. So we Raigeki Break in the standby phase, so that way we can actually get back this Sinister Serpent. They're going to ring the Thousand Eyes Restrict in the main phase, which is kind of interesting. But we're not going to commit a Sinister Serpent and attack in. We're just going to set it, pass back to them. We're not going to commit the Sinister Serpent and attack because we know about the Exiled Force in hand. So they can just bring that out, clear the Serpent pretty easily. This way they might be tempted to potentially use the Exiled Force to pop our set. So they're going to bring out that Exiled Force, and they are indeed going to tribute it to pop the set. It is just Sinister Serpent. They're going to set 2, pass back to us. And we draw Graceful Charity, which is pretty great given the hand that we've got. So we're going to go for a Graceful Charity here, drawing 3, pitching a Serpent and a Thunder Dragon. And we're going to bring out this Shining Angel. They've got Call of the Haunted. And they're going to choose the Witch as a target. So if this was something like a target Sangan, then we would have just chained MST to that. But since they chose to search out Witch, we actually do have a lethal line here. So we're going to chain the MST to their call, just in case they've got something like a TT set. And we're going to hit the other set, not the call. It's just a meta, so it was a bluff anyways. And we'll be able to neatly win the game here, as long as they don't search out like a Karibo. But looks like they don't have a Karibo in the deck, so that will be the end of this game. Now, that was the end of match 1, but we actually played another match as well, just showing off this deck even further. So let's dive into that and see how that one goes. Okay, we're going into our second match against Android. We're both playing the same decks that we were playing in our first match, because it was a pretty cool matchup to see. And also, you know, we could both use practice with these decks. Meta decks are a bit hard to play. I'm not really sure they're like tier 1 or will ever reach tier 1 contention, but they definitely are like tier 2 at least. And when you play a tier 2 deck in a format like this, you really do have to be on top of the ball with like every play you make. So it can be very, very difficult to pilot. So practice is always good. Our opponent's just going to bring out a Gemini Elf, set 2, and pass back to us. We're just going to set a Shining Angel, set an MST here, and pass back to them. They're going to just MST our Mirage, which, I mean, I think that makes sense because they don't want us to get a draw here. They're going to go for a Graceful Charity here, drawing 3 and pitching 2. They're going to pitch a Gemini Elf and a Fiber Jar there. They're going to go for Raigeki on our set. It's Shining Angel. They will be able to get in for 1900 here, which is a bit unfortunate. Our opponent's going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw Raigeki, which is pretty decent. We're going to set a Magician of Faith, pass back to them. And they're going to hit into our set. We'll be able to get back that Mirage of Nightmare here. Hopefully be able to use it more than we did before. And we'll pass back to them. We draw another Soul of Purity and Light, which we actually could use. And I think we actually might, just to try and bait out some removal there. And we will indeed go for that. That's okay by them. We're going to hit in to their Elf. That will indeed go through for 100. And then we're just going to set the Raigeki, set the Serpent, and then activate a Mirage, pass back to our opponent. They're going to go for a Scapegoat here. To just get out 4 monsters here. This might mean that they've got a meta into Thousand Eyes Restrict, which would be a bit unfortunate, but at least we do have a Raigeki here. So they are indeed going to meta into Thousand Eyes Restrict here. Bring that out and target our Soul of Purity and Light. That's perfectly fine by us. This is honestly a pretty stable game state here because we can just keep setting out the Serpent every turn. In draw phase, we're just going to MST the Mirage there, so we get to keep all the great cards in our hand. We're just going to Dark Hold this board. We could have potentially gone for the Raigeki instead, as they might have the read that the set Raigeki is a powerful spell. We didn't want to lose the Mirage, but I think it's ultimately fine just going for the higher value play of the Dark Hole. And let's see what we want to do here. We're just going to go for double banish into Soul Purity and Light. They've got the TT for that, but we can set this Sinister Serpent here and pass back to them. So they are going to go for a Mystic Tomato, and that's fine by us. They'll hit into our Serpent here. I still feel really good about this. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw Monster Reborn, which is really nice. that can let us get pretty aggressive here. We're going to change heart targeting their tomato. Unfortunately, they've got the IO for that. So we're just going to set this fiber jar, pass back to our opponent. We could have also just set a Sinister Serpent, as we are lower on life points. So we might just want to let them, pay enough for the Imperial Order to equalize things a little bit. But I think with the IO up, they've got such control of the game state that it is just better for us to go for the Fiber Jar play here. So they're going to pay 700 to keep that IO online. They're going to go for a Spirit Reaper and try and rip a card out of our hand. So I'm very glad we Fiber Jarred here. So everything will get shuffled back into deck except for the 4 light monsters that we banished off the Soul of Purity and Light. That does make the Soul of Purity and Light a bit more of a brick in this sort of reshuffled game state. But ultimately, given this hand, I think that's fine because this is a really good hand. So everything gets shuffled back, and unfortunately, the 1,000 Restrict will also get shuffled back in the deck due to a quirk in how this is coded on DB, which is just kind of funny. So they're just going to bring out that 1,000 Restrict and actually put it in the extra deck where it belongs. So, and then they're just going to pass back to us. No back row. That's really nice. We're just going to bring out a Spirit Reaper here to hit in. We could have also brought out Injection Fairy Lily to put them on a 2-turn clock, which I think may have potentially been better, but they can just set a monster here to block off that play a little bit. So I think ultimately this is fine. We get some value off the Reaper. Hit out a Parshath, which is very nice. We're going to set a Imperial Order and a Ring of Destruction, pass back to them. I feel like this is relatively safe to do, as they could have just set an MST relatively safely as a bluff. And they chose not to do that, so I feel like they don't have an MST in hand. They're going to bring out a Sangan here, hit into our Reaper. That's fine by us. We'll take 700. They're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw a Sinister Serpent. We're going to bring out a Witch of the Black Forest, hit in for 100 there. And then they will get a search off the Sangan, grabbing a Gravekeeper Spy to hand. We're going to hit a in with the Spirit Reaper. We're really hoping that we hit that Spy. That Spy will be very problematic for us potentially. And luckily we do. Whoo! Spirit Reaper, more like Spirit Sniper, am I right? They bring out a Gemini Elf, and they can hit into the Reaper here for a bit of damage. We're going to think about whether we want to ring this, and we will indeed ring it, as I do believe we have game on board next turn if we're able to bring out Injection Fairy Lily and get in for everything here. So we are just going to try and go for that. The MST here is icing on the cake. We'll be able to MST their back row. It's just a meta, and this will indeed be lethal damage. We attack first with Spirit Reaper in case they don't want to scoop right away, because this could potentially reveal more information about their deck, but no, they just scoop it up, and that is the wise thing to do there. So we're going to go into game 2 here. I'm feeling really good about how this deck has been performing in general. And, oh, I should mention that we did indeed side in the Torrential Tributes. We actually sided out one copy of MST, which is maybe a bit iffy given that the Mirage is just very, very powerful there. We sided out a Banish of the Light because I feel like banishing things isn't really as detrimental to a meta deck than other decks in the format. And we also sided out a Delinquent Duo, I believe, because, again, just like with the Machine OTK deck, this deck didn't really care as much about getting cards ripped out of their hand, I think. I mean, I don't quite remember if I sided out the Duo or a third card, but I think it was the Duo that I sided out. But anyway, this is a pretty good opener. We're just going to set a TT, set a ring, pass back to our opponent. You might be wondering why we're not Forceful Sentrying now. And the reason for that is if they've got like a Sangan or something like that, then the Forceful Sentry could potentially have value to shuffling back whatever they search, and especially if we're going for the TT on whatever they have set play here. So unfortunately they MST our TT, which is very rough for us. They're going to flip up this Mystic Tomato here and attack in for 1400. We could potentially just ring it, and we choose not to, which maybe was a mistake. I think it's ultimately fine. We get a little bit rewarded for it with a Mirror Force here. We're going to summon out this Injection Fairy Lily. They're going to ring it here. So we each take 400. We're going to go for a Forceful Sentry and see what they've got, because we figure we've got enough effect removal that Mystic Tomato is not going to be able to search out a Sangan or a Witch. And we see Change of Heart, Monster Reborn, Metamorphosis, and Air Knight Parshath. Now, I think in hindsight, what I should have taken here was the Reborn. As, we've got ways to clear the Parshath, or if they meta into Baltra, we've got a way to clear that with Ring, as well as Mirror Force. But we don't really have a follow-up to if they reborn the Parshath. I mean, I guess we get 2 effect removals, but we don't necessarily want them to have that option there, or to reborn even the Lily and potentially go for the game that way. So I think I should have taken the Lily. Also, if I do go for the Soul of Purity and Light play into Metamorphosis, then Change of Heart is dead against that, which is very, very good, because Ryu Sentry can't be targeted by spells. So I feel like we should have just taken the Reborn. But what I was really afraid of here is if they change of heart one of our monsters, then tribute over it for a Parshath. So I actually send back the change of heart here instead. But this was a major misplay, and it might have actually cost me the game here. Unclear. I make a much worse misplay later in this match that definitely cost me the game. But I feel like this is ultimately fine. They're all very powerful spells in hand, so I feel like that's ultimately okay. We draw a Thunder Dragon, which is very nice here. We're going to pitch that, grab 2 more. And then we're just going to think about this for a bit, and we're actually going to pitch a Thunder Dragon and fail to find here, which is something that you can do in this format. This shuffles up our deck a bit, and also gets 2 lights engraved, so we can bring out this Soul of Purity and Light. And that is okay by them. Here's where I make a major misplay. So I figure I want to keep the Thunder Dragon left in hand to potentially make plays with it later on. And I feel like Sentry is good in case they've got like a trap in the back row. Sentry can shut that down because I'm tunneling in on like Mirror Force. Mirror Force would be really unfortunate for me. So that's what I'm tunneling in on. What I really should have done here is I should have tribute set the Thunder Dragon, meted into Dark Balter. And the reason I should have done this is because Dark Balter, it loses to Mirror Force and TT, sure, but it also shuts down Reborn in hand. It shuts down Meta in hand. It also negates Mystic Tomato's effect, so that's really, really good. And the pros of having a Dark Balter on field is just so much worse than the cons of if that is like a Mirror Force or something. So this was a major misplay on my part, and I think it actually does cost me this game. As Dark Balter is just so annoying for our opponent to deal with. We also have to use the Ring of Destruction here early on the Tomato in order to prevent them from getting a search off this. So, if we had brought up Balter, we wouldn't have had to do that. So yet another reason why this is kind of a really awkward play. And, I'm just going to reveal their hand here just so we can see why this is bad, because they've got a Dark Hole. Balter would have been able to stop the Dark Hole. Yeah, there are only like 3 things that it would have to be able to stop because, you have to pay 1,000 life points each time, but it still would have been better just to bring out the Balter here. As is, they can Dark Hole our Sentry, and they could potentially go for a Reborn, and they are indeed going to Reborn. They can't Reborn our Ryu because Ryu was not properly summoned. So instead, they're going to Reborn our Lily. And we do have Mirror Force for the Lily, so we will be able to deal with it that way and clear that, but it is still quite unfortunate. So if we had, done the Balter play, I think we would have still been really fine here. As, even if they call the Haunted back a Tomato, then Balter can still clear it again and again. And yeah, it's just, Balter would have been such a much better play. And that just cost me the game here. I mean, hindsight's 2020, and if that was a Mirror Force, then Balter would have also potentially been pretty bad for me. But even if it was a Mirror Force, I still had the ring, I still had the Mirror Force to potentially protect myself a little bit more. So I still think it would have probably been better just to go for the Balter play, as there are much more things the Sentry play loses to than the Balter play. As is, this will just be really rough for us. We have to decide here whether we want to deck thin a little bit, or whether we want to just, deprive our opponent of the search entirely. But we are just going to elect to deck thin, as we really need it right now. And if we drew a Shining Angel, that wouldn't actually really help us here that much. So we're just going to get these Shining Angels out of our deck. This way, if we draw another Soul of Purity and Light, that will be online. We're actually going to bring out a Magician of Faith, just in case they bring out like a Spirit Reaper. This way, the Spirit Reaper won't be able to attack directly and rip a card out of our hand. And Magician of Faith is something that happens over 2 turns. And at this point, we're low enough in life points that we can't actually afford those 2 turns. So this also decked in a little bit more. They're going to get in for 11 there, and they're just going to pass back to us. We draw MST, which won't quite do it because the call was not attached to the Tomato that's on field right now. Another reason why I potentially shouldn't have decked in there. But, as I said at the start of this match here, it's tough playing these meta decks, as they are, like, not the best decks in the format, and they really do take a lot of practice and skill to pilot. So mistakes like that will happen. I think with more games with this, seeing how powerful Balter can be, I think I probably would have gone for the Balter play and potentially won that game. But, those sorts of things come with time, and in the future, now I'll know how powerful Balter will be. But anyways, we're going to go for the Comfy here to open up, and we see a pretty good hand on their part. We're going to take the Change of Heart, as I do think Change of Heart is probably the most powerful card on this field here. And then seeing that they've got Dark Hole in hand, we're actually going to choose not to summon anything or commit anything aboard. We're just going to set this MST, pass back to our opponent. This maybe was a bit of a misplay. I think maybe I should have just committed something to board anyways. If they use Dark Hole on it, it's not the worst thing in the world, as, you know, I'm okay losing a Reaper or an Angel. And we've got Call of the Haunted to bring back anyways. We're just going to set a Shining Angel now, figuring that that's a Serpent. Unfortunately for us, it's a Fiber Jar, so that will enable our opponent to get a major swing in tempo, also nullify our confiscation a little bit. And so we've just lost 1,000 life points for nothing, basically. But that's how it happens sometimes. If we had committed a monster board last turn, then we could have potentially flipped it up into the Fiber Jar, although our opponent could have just Dark Hold our set and then set a Fiber Jar as well, so it might not have actually ended up mattering there. Anyways, our opponent's going to bring out a Mystic Tomato, hit in for 14. They're going to set one, pass back to us, and we're just going to set a Sangan and then set everything and fire a Mirage. So we feel very good about this, and we're just going to draw 4 off that Mirage. This is really good. They're going to go for a Graceful of their own, which is unfortunate, pitch a Meta and an Elf, and they're going to attack into our Sangan here. We're going to think about exactly what to get, but we're going to get a Sinister Serpent. That is a pretty good card here. In draw phase, we're going to MST the Mirage, as this is a pretty great hand. I think they think that we're MSTing their set, but we were not doing it. But it's fine. You know, when that sort of thing happens, we play as if we don't know what they have set. And the play that I think I do here would be just to fire Confiscation, see what they've got. It's a Raigeki, a TT, a Spy, and a Sangan here. I think Sangan is the most threatening to us because we want our TT play to be good here. So if we just set like a Serpent, then they have to commit something else to board if they want to attack in. But we can TT if they commit something else to board. So I feel like this is ultimately fine. They could always Raigeki our Serpent, but if they Raigeki a Serpent, that's perfectly fine by us. So they're going to hit in with their tomato there. It's the Serpent. And then they're going to pass back to us. We draw another TT, which is very funny here. We could go for Painful, but I don't really feel the need to yet. And they're going to commit a Gemini Elf. We will TT that, and they'll pass back to us. We can now bring out a Spirit Reaper and just hit in. We've got another TT as protection there. So we do run into the ring, and that is a bit unfortunate. But there were some weird DB issues here. So our opponent just, quit out, came back in. That occasionally happens in DB. But we're just going to pass back to them, and they're just going to set 2, pass back to us. Again, I feel fine just like going for a Serpent play here, passing back to them, and they flip up a Spy. They're going to bring out another Spy here, and I feel like we will just TT that. I mean, it's a bit risky in case they've got something else in hand, as we don't have our 3rd TT set, but I feel like it was ultimately fine. It looks like they're not going to commit anything else to board there. We're going to grab back that Serpent, bring out a Shining Angel. They've got a TT of their own, but we've got this TT to set to deal with whatever they might bring out. They're going to bring out a Mystic Tomato here, and we're actually going to let that go through, as I do feel like we've got other ways to have this, like with Raigeki and stuff, and so we can just use that while we're not in peril of losing all our life points, and feel pretty decent about that. We draw Magician of Faith, which is really nice. Instead of going for the Raigeki, we're going to go for a meta play here, which I think is pretty decent. Maybe I should have saved the meta play for when I'm bringing out like a Dark Balter or something. But I feel like this is still pretty good. It clears the tomato very nicely. Unfortunately, they go for a Scapegoat play here, which implies that they might have a meta coming for us. But it looks like they don't. They're just setting up their board there. We're going to go for Raigeki here, as clearing all those Scapegoat tokens one by one with the Restrict is kind of rough. So we're just going to hit in for 1,400 there. They're going to go for Dark Hole, clearing our board. And then they're going to Call the Haunted, targeting Sangan. We're going to MST that call before the Sangan can reach the field. Unfortunately for us, they've got MST on our TT, and they've got a Injection Fairy Lily, and that will indeed be the end of the game there. So, very, very good matches here. I think in this game 3, I maybe played it a bit too conservatively. Maybe I should have gotten a little bit more aggressive with my TTs. Maybe flip something up a Serpent and like proactively triggering them that way. But I think ultimately I played this game like pretty well. And I mean, I think I played it pretty well. It's kind of iffy, but, hindsight's 2020. And I think that, looking at these replays and sort of analyzing what you might be able to do or versus what you could have done is very, very helpful. And that's one of the reasons why I like sort of going over these replays on the channel and just showing, what the benefit of hindsight can do. But yeah, I thought these were some great matches with a very, very neat deck. So I hope more people give Light Meta a try. There are a lot of different ways to build Metamorphosis decks in this format. I mean, I showed off the Machine Reasoning OTK version, which does play metas to great effect there. I showed off just a more standard, like tribute focused version. And lastly, I've shown off this version as well, the light version. This will probably be the last meta deck I feature on the channel. Just because, I could keep going through all the various different ways you can build it and stuff, but I think these are like the three sort of most promising ways that I've seen in the format. And I do hope that people still continue to experiment with meta, and it is a very, very nice card. It may even see play in just meta decks, well, tier 1 decks, because the decks that include meta are called meta decks. So, but it may even see play in tier 1 decks because they are often playing Sinister Serpent, and meta plus Serpent equals Delta Nine Restriction, which can be very annoying for your opponent out. So, maybe you'll see some splash into that. But who knows? The format is still young, or I mean, I guess underexplored. It's not really that young, but it's still very underexplored. And I hope that people like tinker with it a little bit more. But what did you think of these games? Do you think that light meta is just pure cope and that Metamorphosis decks should just be more standard tribute summon based decks? Or do you think the light meta is actually the best sort of meta deck because of its extension with Soul Purity and Light and the like? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, as always, please do leave a like and also subscribe. I've got a lot more Yata format videos coming out, and we're actually reaching the end of Yata pretty soon. So at that point, we'll be diving into the next format, which will, well, first we'll be diving into Pharaonic Guardian format, which is basically Yata, but with all the Pharaonic Guardian cards unlimited. And then we'll be diving into formats with Magician's Force, which should be very, very fun. So if you want to stay tuned for that, definitely subscribe. It's the best way to be notified when new videos come out. But until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.